Hey there, welcome to episode 33 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. Today is July 11, 2024. It's a Thursday. Going to be a hot one again in Vegas. And the time is almost noon. I think I need to try to record these earlier, but we'll see how today goes. My allergies are still acting up, as usual. Something in the air, something extra dry. I do have an allergic relationship with dust and some of the other particulates that are in the air in Vegas, the greater Vegas area. So we'll see. Episode 33 already. Yay. Today we're talking about reaction videos. I don't know if you are a consumer of these. I think it comes down to two different kinds. There are several variations within each, but I was pondering this the other day, and I figured, hey, I don't have a guest again. It's been a while. Reaction videos. If you're not familiar with what a reaction video is, you could probably pick up your phone or your whatever device you like to watch content on, go to YouTube, and you will probably have a reaction video somewhere in the recommended videos page. You may also have them in if you watch TikTok or not. I don't really see them so often on Instagram. I can't say I'm a big consumer of Instagram or TikTok. TikTok, though, they do have, I think it's called Duet, the Duet feature. So you can take someone's video and then basically react to it. That's they make it really easy. So people do this all the time. You can make funny faces, or you can, be entertaining, funny, sad, whatever the case is. However, what I'm really thinking about here is the longer form reaction videos where I shall describe these. So why do too much up front? Hopefully wherever you found this episode, you are able to see the episode description. The show notes today only have the usual self-promotion links. I didn't want to link to all. There are too many reaction video content creators, and I think you should find ones you like. I will mention them, but you can track down, try to find people who align with your tastes, maybe your political views, etc. A lot of reaction content, especially now as the election fast approaches, and nothing in particular interesting about this year's election, but a lot of reaction commentary, etc. So let's get to the show notes and the summary of today's episode, and then the two links that hopefully you've heard before. On the one hand, a good reaction video to a movie, perhaps. A movie already seen can be interesting and entertaining. Watching someone, in excerpts usually, experience that which we already have, the big moment, the final outcome, and so on. When those excerpts are news stories, important presentations, or other reactions to similar things, and we treat those reactions as valid analysis of events we may ourselves not have consumed directly, this is my opinion, we lose. So that's what today is all about. The two links are, as usual, my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo and Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You do not have to spend any money on either of these, but I do use these as a sort of an announcement and a link, not quite a link tree, but pretty close, tool, so that you can click on one of those. I've had these for years, and so I'm trying to put them to use. And I do have some of my favorite coffee beans on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo page, in addition to links to the 4, although I did update, so possibly 5. Maybe number 5 is making a comeback. Programming, audio programming that I produce each week, and some links to my GitHub repositories for various other things, including the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, etc. I don't really promote the Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a 501c3 public charity, so I don't really promote that outside of, you can visit the website, make a tax deductible donation. I'm not an attorney nor a tax preparation professional, but that's a separate thing. If you would like to support civic volunteerism, that does not go to me. that goes to the organization. But everything else, if you are interested, you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to pay any money, but any monies would go for coffee. Coffee powers these projects. Let us begin. So, reaction videos. These are performative. There's just no question about it. The entire ecosystem, the entire economy of content creation is based on attention, and to get attention and maintain it so that you can maintain your revenue streams and your advertiser influencer relationships, you have to maintain that audience, the suitable audience, hopefully. And so performance is it. You must be interesting, entertaining, maybe even annoying, insulting, combative sometimes. So it depends on the audience, depends on what works. And that's where any content creator goes, to where their audience is. They are based on existing work. Pretty much. That's how reaction videos work across the board. You are reacting to something, and it's usually something someone else made or created or produced or captured, right? It could be just a normal, like a police chase video that somebody caught on their cell phone. But if you react to that, that's somebody else created this thing, and then you are creating additional content around that. And that has come up as something of a controversy, whether reaction videos, are creative work or they are copyright violations. So if you are transforming the original content and you are not simply watching the video with your audience, there are arguments to be made. But for the most part, and by the way, it's interesting, the whole nature of this is rooted in movie reviews, or any review of anything, where the reviewer should be allowed to demonstrate examples of parts of a movie, for example, to comment on. So some of the reaction video concept is really, and I do make reference to the infamous Siskel and Ebert. So it's pretty much rooted in that notion as far as video and excerpting and commentary and so on. The question is what the motivation is. Siskel and Ebert were paid movie review columnists for the respective newspapers in Chicago. Gene Siskel was at the Sun, and I can't remember where Roger Ebert was, but yeah. So they were paid professionals doing movie reviews. So I'm going to say it's a little bit different. But anyway, the reactions to movie watches, I guess, are sometimes organic and even sincere, and there's little in the way of preparation. Often it's, I've never seen this before. This may or may not be true with news of the day reactions. Often these are part of a larger story arc, and people can have political leanings or ideological preferences or preconceived viewpoints, etc. With movies, you might know the actors, you might know the director, you may have heard something about the story, you may literally judge the movie based on the poster, or nowadays more almost like cover art, wherever they're watching the movie on, whichever streaming service or what have you. So the fun part though about reaction videos, usually organic and unscripted, usually, probably mostly. Because you don't have to do any work. Ideally, these sincere reactions are based on a first time watching of whatever it is. And the audience sees the host watching for the first time, possibly in agreement with them, or maybe riling them up, maybe completely wrong. How could you say that? It was a great movie. Or how can you say that about this particular, the hurricane or whatever they're reacting to? It could be anything. Whether it's a movie or news of the day, reactions eventually become about the audience reaction to the reactor on the screen. We are entertained or allegedly enlightened by what they have to say as we watch along with them, but they're working not to be correct or not to offer sage insight into whatever it is they are reacting to. They're just going with their reactions, and oftentimes they develop an audience because the audience likes the what would you call it? Well, they continue to get what they want. So the person with their YouTube channel, might be more than one person, they will continue to deliver what their audience likes. That's just the name of the game. This might even mean a truly honest review rather than always being funny or always coming up with the best parts. The probably one of the most infamous, and it's not really reactions, but sort of, I'm pretty sure it's scripted, it's definitely produced, is what is it? Like everything wrong with, CinemaSins, yeah. Everything wrong with a movie. And then they have other things like TV sins and whatnot. But CinemaSins is often lambasted for being a bad movie review channel. But I believe it's really supposed to be more of a satire. Or at the very least, just making fun of things, kind of going over the top. So, of course, they're going to continue to do that. They will point out, they will assign a sin for something that probably isn't, but it's comical. It's not supposed to be. So I don't consider that in the same class, but it is interesting that they deliver what people are expecting regardless. They'll even say up front, like, this is the best movie ever. I think when they did Predator or Alien, generally regarded as excellent movies, they say it right up front. I know it's the best movie in the world, but, or whatever their disclaimer is. So that's not really what I'm talking about. So those are performative, but they are specifically entertainment and satirical perhaps, or that's a different thing. But you can come to expect a certain amount of insight or type of reaction, or so for I'll get into some examples, but and the same goes with political or news oriented, a lot of politics lately. So global, domestic, etc. So let's talk about movies first. Most reaction videos about movies are about old movies, which is sort of strange. I don't really see people reacting to movies that came out. Well, I don't see them. They might be out there, but the AI, the algorithms, they do what they do. But I've actually checked out. I cannot remember how I came upon. I think you know what it was. I think I started watching. Now I've seen movie review reaction type stuff here and there, but I made a concerted effort because I came across one. It's either 1, 2, or 3. I think they're Vietnamese, or I think they're in Vietnam, and I believe they're Vietnamese women on a channel called Movie Munchies, and I just thought it was comical. It was hilarious. They really don't go. They go far back on movies. They're not doing movies. They do a couple of movies that are more recent, but they're doing movies from the 80s and the 90s. Same with I'm gonna name off a few here, but they're picking off the 80s and 90s. I think the Gen X is the target audience, so that's me. Maybe it's you. Looking back at movies we saw when we were teenagers, so there's some nostalgia appeal, perhaps. So maybe for the nostalgia, but also I do actually get a kick out of their insights if they are indeed unscripted. There's the cultural difference. There's the time difference, difference in age and life experience and whatnot. So like I said, Movie Munchies, they're just hilarious, but it's almost overwhelming, so I haven't watched them in a while. Media Nights is two people who I believe are I don't know if they're cinematographers or if they're just movie producers. I don't believe they are famous for any of their productions, but I'm not really sure. But they offer some opinions that are allegedly insightful, but they are interesting opinions, even though I don't really find much technical information in them. But okay. There's a person named Whimsery, and I believe she's actually a voice talent. It's WHIMSORY, Whimsery. She's actually very insightful. She makes some really good observations about movies. She's only been doing it for a short time, so she creates these reaction videos that have improved in production value rather quickly. But interesting there, she actually rewatches the movie afterwards, edits everything together, comes up with various opinions about character development and theme and story and all that. So more interesting than you would think. Kat watches horror movies as just sort of funny. She tries to guess when things are going to be, that guy's going to come around that corner, and she's often right. Movie munchies and cat watches horror movies are almost suggestive that they either have some hints or, yeah, who knows. But we always have to remember that the YouTube versions of these are edited with highlights essentially. So they're really trying to draw. They're trying to draw you to their Patreon channels, which is the standard business model, so you can watch along. Not live. I haven't seen anybody do reactions live. I'm sure people do for movie watching. Movie watch nights are not a new thing. Probably during the pandemic, those were very common between everybody. So the Patreon scenario, you pay money, you become a supporter of their channel, a subscriber, and you can watch their real time. They watch the movie, their commentary through kind of like Mystery Science Theater 3000, maybe a little bit. But you have to get your own copy of the movie so they don't violate copyrights, and you can watch along with them. And I've not done this, but I'm assuming they start with, okay, press play now, and you are right there with them the whole time. So interesting to watch these. The universal model, again, the Patreon, but I really just stuck with the YouTube highlights, that's part of the thing that I will be getting to here. You can respond or comment to the YouTube part, but it's sort of, you're only catching like a sampling of the overall thing. I'm going to guess that the Patreon full reaction viewing is boring. I mean, most of the time you're watching a movie, you want to watch the movie. The interesting thing, though, is because they are doing this with movies from the 80s and 90s, their audience, it may be their peers, it may be Gen Z and millennials, but I have to imagine, based on some of the comments I see where they correct or they, oh yeah, that character was actually in 12 other movies. So there are people that are given the backstory, the trivia and whatnot. So I have to imagine their audience is mostly Gen X or older, people who saw those movies. And so it's interesting that you can watch someone today watching a movie that you saw when it came out. Maybe you saw it in a movie theater. And so you're watching their reactions and you're thinking, oh yes, that part. Oh, I remember that part. Oh yes, that was scary. Oh, it's interesting when you look back at that, that didn't age well, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of commiserations. And I think that kind of makes them interesting or fun. It's a nice diversion, I guess. But some of their comments, some of their insights, some of their observations are pretty interesting. Today, looking back at movies we saw when they were released, 20, 30 years ago, more. I did, for nostalgia and scientific purposes, watch about a dozen young reaction video creators, whether individual or sometimes there's two people, sometimes there will be even three or four. Like I said, movie punchy, sometimes three, but mostly one person for these. That's just the way it worked out. I did watch and I basically fast forwarded it's about the same point. Even though they're cut down highlight reel, you can pretty much figure it's going to be in the final quarter of their presentation. I fast forwarded to the moment in the Sixth Sense. Can't speak. The Sixth Sense. And it was actually entertaining. I'm not going to spoil the movie if you haven't seen it. Strangely enough, there are people who have never seen it or don't know the deal. But Sixth Sense was pretty groundbreaking at the time it was released. Pretty shocking. Well done. Unfortunately, probably the best movie in M. Night Shyamalan's catalog. They all experienced it about the same way. It was a nice nostalgic throwback, right? Like, oh yeah, I remember being in the theater, and it was sort of impressive that a spoiler about the nature of the Sixth Sense has lasted this long, that it wasn't ubiquitously spoiled. Crazy. I know that various reviewers so many years later have actually spoiled the movie, so it's entirely possible that reaction content creators, when they're doing movies, are honestly avoiding being spoiled by detailed analysis of the nuance and subtlety, and or the complete surprise or absolute horror or jump scare, this or whatever it is. It could be anything. I mean, by now, if you haven't seen Exorcist 3, I'm not going to spoil that either, but it has been described as one of the best jump scare scenes ever. And I have to say, it's pretty well done for a movie that far back in the past. And of course, the performances of the actors. I'm just going to let you track that down. Don't watch Exorcist 2. Just jump right from Exorcist to Exorcist 3. I enjoyed it. But either way, they're all acting. Maybe. They're either putting on an honest face and being honest about that presentation, which you can say is acting, but from an internal place, or they are completely performative and they already knew whatever is happening in whatever movie it is. Either way, though, it's a convincing presentation. So I find it interesting. And again, for the sixth sense, comparing across, I just picked, if you search for reaction, sixth sense, man, let me get some water. You'll find plenty. And so I just chose at random. Very interesting. Now, there's the not movie case. The thing about movie reaction videos, even when we see an excerpted watch with the reaction highlights, so you're not seeing the parts where they're just watching the movie and not saying anything. You got to pay for that, which is weird, kind of inverted. We have probably seen the movie in its entirety, perhaps, probably in the theater if it's these older movies. So maybe it was a while ago, but our memories are jogged as we watch them watching. And, if you're watching a movie about, maybe if you're watching a reaction to Star Wars. Now, I saw Star Wars in the theater in 1977. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you've only had the new stuff. But even though I've not watched Star Wars, which would later become Star Wars A New Hope, Episode 4. By the way, I heard rumors that it was Episode 4 when I was still in elementary school. I mean, before Empire Strikes Back came out. So I don't think anybody was amazingly surprised, but I saw it when it was just called Star Wars. Very, very fine movie at the time. So to watch people reacting to movies that old, you're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that in the theater. And so it's a nice throwback. But the fact is, the reaction videos are interesting because we saw the movie that they're talking about. If I had never seen Star Wars and I was watching a reaction video to Star Wars and I was only watching the excerpts, I might think, I don't know about that movie. I don't know if I would go see that. So I don't know, because they're not offering a review of the movie, although, like I said, Whimsy kind of does that at the end of her presentations. Everybody does a little summary at the end. But they're not doing quite the Siskel and Ebert thing, which I do make a comparison later. But it's interesting that if you've never seen the movie, I don't know what movie. So I'm gonna have to watch a movie that I've never seen. I've not done this yet, because personally, the reaction videos are more interesting when I have seen the movie, because I'm interested to see what they say, and because they're stepping through the movie, again, you can follow them along, follow along with them, and again, have that nostalgic, oh yes, oh this part, oh yep, that reaction, I thought the same thing, etc. Very often, though, reaction videos about news of the day or non-entertainment in general will be shown as excerpts, as they're not, you don't sit there and watch with them the entire 2-hour, 3-hour Joe Rogan Experience episode, which I'll get to in a moment. So they're basically offering clips of a show as they're reacting to segments that they've already watched separately, if they even have the time. The Joe Rogan thing that we'll talk about with Terrence Howard would be 7 hours of watching of 2 episodes of Jerry. I don't really watch Jerry, so I did watch these because the Terrence Howard thing got so much weird review. So I was like, what is this? And that was a goofy episode. And then the Eric Weinstein one, I will tell you before I'm pre-promoting the later section of this very episode. After I'll say it now. Why not? After the Terrence Howard content came out, there was an explosion of reaction of all different kinds. And so I'll get more specific later. Eric Weinstein was on, what's his name? Not Brett. Keating? Brian Keating. Brian Keating's has a physics show. So they were talking about it, and Eric said, I think part of the problem in general with our academic terrain and people wanting to get into science fields is that we tell people to be explorers, to go out and learn, to read and be excited. But then when Terrence Howard comes along, and he has the celebrity to get on Joe Rogan and say this, but he said when someone does have a new idea and they've spent their time in the library reading, maybe they didn't go to school, but they want to, they're thinking about pursuing a path in mathematics or geometry or physics or whatever it is. So we have someone who has the mindset to be curious, but they end up going down some very odd paths because they're just sort of on their own, self-taught. I've had comments, I've said them before about the self-taught thing. The problem isn't the student, it's the teacher. But the take home during this appearance on Keating, and Eric Weinstein makes frequent appearances, they're friends, on Brian Keating show. He said it would be interesting to try to peel back the sort of misuse of terms and mispronunciation and some of the things that don't really make sense, and see if there are any nuggets of interestingness in there. So Eric Weinstein appeared on the show as a follow-up to do exactly that. So very interesting, I thought. So there are people that watched the 7 hours of that, and I also did, although I didn't sit down and watch them focused. I sometimes will have things playing while I'm working. And it was a tricky several hours to get through. So what happens is you have people that watch these and then they summarize them. They pull out the highlights that they think are the most indicative, not necessarily, possibly the most entertaining or the most likely to retain viewership and entertain their audience. So you're going to get their reactions, you're going to get their commentary, but it's going to be on selection bias, anyone? Selected excerpts that align with their motivated reasoning, which is Terrence Howard is a nut. So they're going to put the clips that are most indicative of his being a nut, whichever nut you want to select. So by selecting reactions that align with ours, so that we don't actually need to take the time to consume the media in question, we end up with an impression that is shaped by this person that we're watching. And so I watched a couple of reaction videos to the Eric Weinstein second pass, and that was really interesting. And I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole, but even more vitriolic than the first set. And the first set of people reaction videos to just Terrence Howard were pretty mean. So YouTube and Terrence Howard's presentation, not really consequential, more of a just sort of an odd thing to get such attention. No impact on the world, not yet anyway. But sort of again a distraction. So YouTube and Twitch and any other platform is all about views and engagement, and so that's how people get paid. That's how you monetize videos. That's why advertising is so important, because you want advertisers that's why your content and advertisers are so important. You want advertisers to be able to place ads on your content so that you get some cut of that advertising dollar. And YouTube wants the same. So it always makes me laugh a little bit that people, they're demonetizing me. They're doing all these things to hurt my business. And you're like, well, you are in business with YouTube. So they want to make money. I'm not totally shilling for YouTube here, but when you think about it, you should build your own platform to distribute your own content and select your own advertisers, and not do the work of policing content for inappropriate content, content for particular advertisers, so that the advertisers don't feel they're hitting the wrong target audience, or they're paying for content that doesn't align with their own ideologies, or maybe it's even questionable legality or suggestive, whatever it is, right? So I've heard this before. I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but I've heard this before. YouTube is taking your revenue. Like, they're also finding your advertisers. They've built this entire platform that can handle real-time streaming, and so they do a lot of things wrong, but they also do a lot That's how it works. So anyway, the whole model is based on retaining viewership, people that watch entire videos all the way to the end. And from what I understand, that's very difficult with a 4-hour video. Sure. I mean, if you sit down and watch a 4-hour video, it's going to be a long one. So sometimes it's easier to watch a reaction. Or should I be watching the entire news story of a particular, is this country attacking that country? Do I have to keep up with the details every day, every news article, every field reporter, video of things exploding and travesties and worse? Or can I just watch some reaction videos? Can I just watch, pick someone who is politically or geopolitically engaged? So we'll get to Hassan next. But generally speaking, when you go from movies, which you have seen probably, or you could just go and watch the entire movie, it's sometimes a 90-minute, 2-hour. If it's a Zack Snyder movie, it's going to be 6 hours. But you could, if you have not already, but oftentimes you already have seen the actual movie. So the reactions are nostalgia or curiosity or, oh, I wonder what they thought of this. I'm curious to know because there are other reactions and so on. When you're talking about news of the day or geopolitical scenarios that are unfolding, speculation into the future, reactions to debates about these events. So you take a debate, you cut it down to the interesting exchanges between, learned geopolitical thinkers. So you have someone like Hassan who will then chime in on his views, cut different parts of different sections of a particular debate and so on. So yeah, let's just jump into Hassan Piker. If you are not familiar, he's famously Cenk Uyghur's, I hope I'm saying that correctly. I think I am. Cenk Uyghur's nephew. Cenk is basically, I think he's the co-founder, but he's the louder and more annoying face of the Young Turks, which he used to be on MSNBC, and then they launched this, attempt at a separate independent news organization, and they're still going. So it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting channel, platform, whatever. But Hassan has a huge following on Twitch, where he basically spends full 12-hour days. I think I've never watched his Twitch stream live, but from what I understand, he wakes up, or maybe wakes up after. He ends up in front of a camera and just starts talking and chatting with his audience with a real-time chat platform. And basically, people will suggest things, or he'll look at the news of the day and say, oh, yeah, let's watch this news report, or let's watch this debate, or let's watch whatever it is. And he will offer his reactions. And usually he's interacting with his chat audience, and they'll make all manner of comments. And the chat is usually streaming on the side of the screen or on the bottom or something. You can see some of it, but let's face it, you're not really reading the chat. So if you're not in the chat room, you're sort of passively participating, and you are listening in on sometimes outright silliness, sometimes somewhat insightful. It's a mixed bag, my opinion. This is not a unique setup. A lot of people are doing this. Some are more political, some are less. If you look at Vosh, he's had some troubles with horses or something. And then Destiny, who I don't remember his actual name, Steven something, I think. Destiny does a lot of debates, but also does a lot of reactions to debates and a lot of reactions to this. So very similar format, and that's barely scratching the surface there. And if I was more of a Twitch consumer, I would probably come upon more. There are people that do commentaries while they're playing video games. So I don't know if they embed other content in with the video game so that they can comment on the thing while distracting people with video games. Who knows? Who knows what ADHD enables nowadays? But the same deal with any of these things. It's about maintaining that connection with the audience. So by inviting them into real-time chat, especially if they're paying for super chats, etc., you can be in the in crowd and be a part of these reactions. You can offer your comments, or one way to really draw people in is you say, hey, chat, what's the answer to this question I have? So that way they don't have to actually pause and look anything up, and somebody in chat will chime in. Ooh, I got to get that first. So it's really about that strong engagement with the audience. So the reactor, the reaction content creator, can be fully interactive with their audience in the real time stream version, but they may go on. They may do the full reaction. I don't think this happened. I don't know of any cases that this did, but they could sit there and watch a 4-hour Joe Rogan Experience episode with Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard, and they could react to individual elements of it. That would make it even longer than 4 hours if they're pausing and commenting. So nobody's really going to sit through that. So practically speaking, they can do one of three things. They can either watch it offline, cut it into excerpts, and comment on them. That's been done. Other people have done, this happened with this particular episode. Nobody wants to watch 4 hours plus more commentary. So you cut it down. 2, you have your audience offer clips of the original. Check this out, or check out this part where this happens. So you trust your audience to do some of the sort of content grabs, I guess, excerpting, but like the parts that are most interesting. Well, then you're going to get the bias of your audience because they're going to pick the parts that are the most egregious, the most entertaining, the most ridiculous, whatever it is. So you may not be getting the full flavor. Or the third option is to react to other reactions. This one's not, I don't see this as often, but you watch other people making comments about these clips. And so then you're doing even less work, because then you're just off the cuff saying, oh yeah, I think that was ridiculous. Or what does he mean? The 1 times 1 equals 2 thing got the most attention, I believe. But as Eric Weinstein points out, well, but you start with that. And after that, people can discount everything you say because they know that's wrong. So that's where you could offer to your audience that, well, everything he says is ridiculous, so let's just pick the most ridiculous. So you skip right over every even potential nugget of truth if you dismiss the person straight out. And so that's a point that is made early on, or not early on in the 4 hours, but it's a point that he makes about being dismissed early on when you assert something that's patently weird, not even not true, but like where are you getting that? And it's interesting because during the Brian Keating discussion, Eric Weinstein did suggest, like, well, if you're looking at group theory, multiplication is a summation. So maybe he's come up with something in a weird reading of that. So he's like, I could kind of see where he might get down that path incorrectly. But so he was being not nearly so dismissive, talking about Terrence in the third person. In person, it was a little bit more difficult because eventually he just started saying some of the stuff you say is dumb and some of it isn't. So and interesting. Now, would you have found those sections? I've done something similar here by kind of giving a little excerpt, but the point I'm making is that if you are interested about the topic, it would behoove you to watch the entire 4 hours. Watch it at 1.5x. But it would behoove you to actually watch the original content so that you know what they're talking about when the people commenting and reacting are pointing out only the most entertaining for the sake of their audience and their YouTube or other monetization and stats and whatnot. So, and then one of the worst things I think for this, Hassan, I don't know if he started this, but he has definitely benefited from it. He has allowed a literal army of clip editors. So he basically says, hey, if you want to create a clip show, I think TalkSoup, if you remember way back in the day, you can edit together clips of my shows and create a channel for yourself, because he realized the value of free advertising, right? So he's allowing people to advertise his show and get paid for it by monetizing cut down excerpt productions of his show. So they're not even reaction. They're literally just excerpts of his show. They're sometimes edited together such that, you got to say, wait a minute, these are from completely different periods of time through the year, like facial hair and hairstyle and, clothing and whatnot. Everything is different between different parts. And so it's a hodgepodge. So there's zero editorial oversight. There's really, as long as you don't defame, and I don't even know if they're checking that, but I'm sure someone in his someone in his audience would point out a troublesome edit. But there's absolutely zero editorial oversight, so that the clips would be edited to craft a particular narrative. You could watch two different clip channels that summarize. Terrence Howard was on Joe Rogan, and it was ridiculous. And they'll make a nice thumb with Hassan making a weird face and like an exclamation of some sort, and a little shot of Terrence when he's on the show, on Joe Rogan's show. So they'll cut and paste, and they'll create this thing, and they want the views, and they don't want to do much work. So they're just going to cut down what is probably already a severely cut down take from Hassan on this. I think the first appearance was 3 hours, was it? And the Eric Weinstein part was 4 hours. Why was it 4 hours? Because now he's picking apart, he's commenting. So you're pausing an already long presentation to add more commentary. So you ended up with a longer episode, if I'm recalling correctly. So by creating clip shows of what is already a subset and probably a motivated reasoning version, like, oh, I heard Terrence Howard was an idiot. Let's present all the things that make him look like an idiot. And then someone comes along and says, oh, I'll make a clip show where I'll take, instead of doing 12 seconds or 15 seconds, which might have a tiny bit of context, let's just cut it down to the 8 seconds where he's just an idiot, and get rid of all the context and the meaning, so we can cut down a 1 hour segment on a 4 hour podcast into a 10-minute clip. And they'll, so they're in and out, they get their money, and then you can get on to the next clip. And that's what you want to see, is people, watching and watching and watching from beginning to end. Everybody wins, sort of. The contentious parts are what makes it in, though. The most ridiculous, the chat audience interaction sometimes, and this happens a lot. The chat will somehow rile up the host. I don't know if this is real or if it's totally performative, but they'll start yelling, and they'll call them names, and you're idiots, and what are you doing, this and that. So any combination of these things can make it into a clip channel, and that gets them views. Anyone who might eschew actual journalistic news coverage and or professional analysis, and this is obviously a touchy topic, with fake news being a thing now, or having always been, maybe. What constitutes professional analysis? That's maybe up for you to decide. But for their favorite streamers, they're basically saying, I don't want to watch professional people who have been in geopolitics reporting or analysis, or real investigative journalism. I would rather hear from a person who sits in a chair literally all day, yelling at a camera and at a chat room. And I will say that Hassan has some interesting insights sometimes. He is well read. I don't know that he's always correct. In fact, I will say he is not always correct. But there are those who are completely devoted. They'd rather hear his take on news coverage or debate or topical discussion or analysis. They'd rather hear what he has to say about excerpts of those things than actually consuming the source material, which I think is bad. And then they'll go ahead and watch clips of it. So now they're hearing, again, the cut down version of a cut down version of an assessment by someone who is motivated by views. And this is not to say that news is not a business in the entertainment division, so they need their ratings and their views too. Where does it end, right? So if people treat professional journalism, especially investigative journalism, people who are really doing the work, talking to the people, doing the reading, doing the research, the background, getting the quotes correct, people with ethics and journalistic training, so they know how to account for their own biases and so on. If people are treating that as equivalent to what Hassan Piker or Vosh or Destiny or any of hundreds or even thousands of people, I don't even know, who knows, if those are becoming equivalent, which they almost certainly are for some, then what happens? Then what happens with news? The narrative can be crafted by people who want you to stick around and hear them talking more, regardless of whether they're actually correct. And the thing is, when you talk to, well, you probably aren't talking to, when you listen to, but when you are consuming content, when you're consuming news or opinion or analysis from platforms, uh, Fox or CNN or MSNBC or any of a variety of others, pick your favorite newspapers and whatnot, if they have a cohort of journalists, actual journalists, of reporters, of investigators, of people who are trained in how to collect information ethically, how to account for bias, how to quote things, how to how to properly provide attestation to facts and so on, right? If there's an entire machine that can work. Now, I'm not saying that it's always used for good. It's there have been some problems in the last couple of decades. But if you can now say, well, there's all of this reporting going on, but there's also this guy that sits in his very expensive house talking about socialism. That's kind of funny, but whatever, not a big deal. But this guy sitting in a chair, his reporting is literally meta reporting. He's literally reporting on other reporting. So when we treat those as equivalent, I think we get into trouble. And unfortunately, news outlets are now, like I said, basically treated like entertainment. They are, I think, often put into the entertainment budget. Often, maybe, I don't know, that might not be 100% true across the board. But news outlets are now concerned with ratings, and you can see them publicizing, oh, tonight the Rachel Maddow show was number one, and the Neil Cavuto, whoever's on Fox, number two, and whatever it is. So I know Neil Cavuto doesn't cover the same stuff as Rachel Maddow, whatever. The take home, though, is that we've made all these different news outlets almost equivalent. So you have source material reporting, and then you have meta reporting. The word reporting should be in air quotes, treated the same. And then excerpts of all that also treated the same. So I'm going to do two examples. I've already touched on one. So let's start with the other, the debate. We all know the now infamous presidential debate from 27 June 2024 between former President Trump and sitting President Biden. It was a 90-minute train wreck. I will say for myself, I think this is my disclaimer, I suppose. I think Joe Biden is a one-term president. I think he has done fine. He's corrected a lot of issues that coming out of the pandemic. A lot of press will have you believe some things, but if you actually look at the numbers, there are other things. And so we can leave it there, but I'm, what do you call it? Well, there's the never Trumpers, but there's like the anyone but Trump. I fundamentally disagree with the Project 2025 possibilities and the Supreme Court silliness and all that stuff. So I am not comfortable with the GOP getting more power. So Biden, not a good choice, but so that's where I come down, just so you know. So it would be difficult to characterize the debate in any other way other than it was a train wreck. Now, the ideological differences found in the different reactors, the assessments that have been made by either professional journalists or by casual alt media content creators, have basically fallen along political lines. They're all generally aligned that Biden could have done anything would have been better. Objectively, complete failure of the mission, which was to convince people that he's capable of forming sentences. So it's unfortunate. That's the way it went. Aging is everybody makes fun of old people, but we all want to be one, right? So it's just a fact. He's getting on in years. That's the way it is. There are different opinions on what comes next, or different amounts of vitriol and other insults and whatnot. But depending on which side of the fence or the aisle and so on, reactions to something like this are sort of a no-brainer, right? You just go with the flow. Nobody is going to come out and say, "But wait." Well, actually, some people did. There was one good section that he got better in the middle, and then he got worse at the end. So there's a little bit of rationalizing. If you actually watch the entire debate, and especially if you're an experienced reporter in the political sphere, if you're a journalist that does actual, DC, Washington, DC, or government covering, Congress or or any of the inside baseball type stuff. You watch the whole debate, you pick it apart as a critic would, and you come away with a nuanced assessment. It's a train wreck, and then here are some things to point out. And it could go either way, right? There were definitely people on one side or the other. So that's to be expected. So the reactions were pretty easy, generally speaking. So if your audience isn't expecting nuance, but rather humor or, pointing and laughing, then even easier, right? Mouth open agape when not speaking. The split screen was not his friend, et cetera, et cetera. These are all low-hanging fruit. Like our movie reactions, we can show a highlight reel with the most extreme, the most ridiculous, the most impressive moments here and there, with commentary that is often performative. Sometimes that's true with the movie reactions, but here it's definitely performative when reacting to something like the debate or other news stories, and satisfying for the audience, whether it's actually of real value or not. So the reaction to the debate, while probably a reasonable indication of how the every person would see something like that, without nuance, without any sort of analysis, without any real analysis, with just pointing and laughing, you're only reinforcing the sort of surface level, like, yeah, that was bad. But why was it bad? Was there anything good? Was there any reason to believe that this was a one type of a scenario over another? But instead, it's more like, oh, look at that. Oh, I've been saying this for a year. He should this and that. So I think it gets a little bit messy when you're covering consequential news in a flippant way. And that's where reaction videos to things like news of the day and all the debates and so on are easier to monetize if you are flip, if you are condescending, if you are extreme in your assessment and opinions and the way you express them and so on. So if the audience only sees the reaction video and the commentary, or worse, the clipped versions of the show, so the clips of the clips, they may accept that as having watched the actual debate. Like, oh yeah, the debate was horrible. Did you watch the whole thing? Oh, I saw whoever it is. It could be Kimmel. Could be whoever's sitting in for Kimmel this week. Could be, any of the late night comedians. Could be any of their assessments. They're not too far off. But if you're going to watch any of the YouTubers and they show a few choice clips, they may or may not have watched the entire thing either. And you can see that if you watch, and you can pick a side. It doesn't really matter. But if you watch a true political analysis show, and you if it's a conversational show or if it's just a video essay, like I'm doing an audio essay right now, you should be able to pick up on the differences on how they approach different parts of this 90-minute train wreck. That's what it is. Versus just pointing and laughing. Right? I experienced this firsthand. I initially did not want. I was actually in a video office hours call for Innovate for Vegas Foundation. We do it on Thursdays, so it literally started when the debate did. So we completely missed the live feed, but that's the world we live in. We don't have to worry about that. So the first thing I did was pull up YouTube to see where I would be able to, catch the replay or whatever. And initially the first 10 things recommended are like, debate is a total ridiculous. Okay, what happened? And you're like, oh, okay. So I either didn't miss much or I missed a train wreck. So I have seen the debate, and I have seen the commentary on the debate, and I've seen the cut down clips of the debate. And you can come away with all kinds of different versions. It's still a train wreck. It was still not good for Biden. It was also not good for Trump, but that's gotten so. I mean, I don't think either of them did anything useful during this debate, only damage. One did substantially more damage to themselves than the other, but there was really nothing useful. There was no elevation that came out of this. It was pretty much negative across the board. So if you don't watch the entire debate, you believe that that's 100% true. If you watch the entire debate, you may say it was negative, but There's a couple of places that have me concerned, that would have me raise questions. So if you filter all that out, filter out the actual source material, and you leave only the extreme moments, you may miss out on some of the details that you may find interesting for yourself. So that continues to be a concern to me. What about the Terrence Howard incidents? There were two. And Terrence Howard, by the way, he's got stuff aside from his scientific fame, infamy. So he's not a he's not a clean slate on which we are drawing these conclusions. He's now become infamous for more, thanks to his unusual mathematical, biological, and geometrical theories, and other comments about he remembers before he was born, and all these other theories he came up with moments before or after he was born. The one and only Joe Rogan had him on for, like I said, I think it was about 3 hours. I think it was a little over. Or it may have been 6 hours, but I think it was over 3. 3? It was around 3, something like that. I did not rewatch them. I will be honest. I did not. I don't even want to see those again. It was a lot. But he had him on for several hours to talk about these things. His treatise on, what does he call it? I can't remember. He has a funky word for his scientific theories, like the Terrence bubble. No, I don't know. I made that up. It was crazy, and it had a lot of reaction. And then Eric Weinstein returned to have another 4-hour episode. That was more recent, so I didn't watch it again, but I watched a reaction video. I think I watched 3 from people who claim to be science educators. One was Kyle Hill, formerly of The Nerdist, and he was actually he was more negative than I would have thought. He was kind of in with the point and laugh crowd. Not as in, but kind of in. But a couple of, it was a lot of really negative responses to the first one. And then a lot of negative to the second one, mostly because people claim that Eric Weinstein is basically his brother's brother. So, Eric and Brett are charlatans and fakers and whatnot. I personally think that Eric Weinstein is sincere. He may be attention seeking now and then, maybe both now and then, but I also think he's sincere in his pursuit of changing the way science behaves, whether people are invited to participate, and what happens if somebody has a new idea but they're not allowed to share it, and so on. So he doesn't stay on the rails 100% of the time in general, but generally speaking, very generally speaking, I've found Eric Weinstein to be a little bit more reasonable, or at least more. He has some interesting insights and opinions on things, and he is a PhD mathematician. He has been focusing on mathematical physics, so theoretical physics. He has his geometric unity theory for a potential theory of everything, so he gets dismissed out of hand for that. And it's like, so I personally saw some parallels, and I try to present a new idea that I have researched thoroughly with my PhD background, and I have a true interest in the science, and he's done a lot of work on it, and people sort of dismiss it out of hand. And he did do a lecture, and there's supposed to be a paper that may or may not be published at this point many years later. So personally, I think he found a sort of a kindred spirit and responses in the Terrence Howard scenario. So he, as I said on the Brian Keating show, that he thought it was interesting that people are encouraged to delve into science and become interested and excited by these things. Yet when someone does so and is maybe wrong about a few things, but given a platform to and plenty of runway to crash, maybe plenty of tracks, I guess, to wreck, then he's lambasted, or people definitely were not in the same camp of hey, if you have an idea and you want to express it, you should go ahead and do that. So once again, I think the reaction videos were much more about flexing, about, I'm a real scientist, and that was crazy, and this guy's an idiot, and all kinds of vitriol. So I think that was unfortunate. In the meantime, reaction videos were all over the map, especially on the first one. Obviously excerpting the multi-hour show. There's no way you're going to, again, you're not going to react on your YouTube channel to a 3 or 4 hour episode of a different podcast. Plus, I think they would copyright strike you. I think Joe Rogan has said before that he had problems with people just reposting entire shows, and I'm fine with that. I think there's a time and a place to excerpt things, and there are neither a time or a place to simply republish someone else's work and to make money on that. That's silly. So, but the reactions were really mean. I think they were really kind of overboard, pointing and laughing. So both the solo Terrence and the Terrence and Eric episodes got their fair share of pointing and laughing, but the Terrence on his own, one times one equals two, led to all manner of people saying this person's insane, this guy's an idiot, this guy, all manner of negativity and whatnot. So then the question becomes, did anyone really pay attention to the whole discussion? And I'm not saying that there were real nuggets that came out of it. I think even Eric Weinstein, I think okay, so first of all, Neil deGrasse Tyson received the 36-page treatise on his theories because he said he would accept the treatise to read before Terrence Howard was supposed to be on his show, maybe. He's got his Star Talk show, I think it is. So then he did, I think, a 20-minute reaction in this case was going through the document, showing his red ink, his markings and so on. And he had sent this back to Terrence Howard and said, I think his conclusion, as I think he said in the video as well, was most of this is wrong, but you do have some nice imagery or some nice, I don't know if he said pretty pictures, but he complimented him on what is essentially his geometry, his approach to and illustrations of some of his ideas in geometry. He said, they look good. They're nice. They're interesting. So Eric expounded on some of that. So, and again, too much. I'm not trying to even summarize more than just a little bit of context. So at the end of this whole thing, Eric says essentially the same thing. Like, you probably have some ideas that are in geometry, and some of your imagery is very creative. Some of your ideas could be maybe the flower of life is really a projection onto 2 dimensions in this case from higher dimensions. So the projection may be this other shape. So he had some additional details about why he thought these were interesting. So I thought that was useful. But at the end of the day, the whole entire thing, the entire 4 hours with Eric and Terrence and Joe Rogan interrupting inappropriately now and then, derailing some of the conversation, which it did not need derailing. It was doing fine on its own. There was so much vitriol for just the fact that he's been platformed twice now. And you don't have to watch. And also, I don't think anyone came away from either episode thinking, okay, Terrence was right. I think what they may come away with in the second episode with Eric Weinstein on there was that you don't have to feel like you're going to be assaulted from all sides if you express an idea. And as Eric also points out, you should express the idea to the right people and get feedback, be willing to accept feedback. And, by the way, this is applicable to all these reaction shows that are doing news of the day, political, geopolitical issues, and so on. It should be much more of a discussion than a yelling at people or attempting to teach or pontificate. And nowhere will you find more pontification than on Hassan Piker's channel. So the context, I found it interesting that the context of the Eric Weinstein presence, which he had described beforehand as something, he appreciates that he was trying to learn probably on his own. And he points this out as well. The way he pronounces some words, you probably never heard them before. You just read them in books and you didn't know how to say them. It's tricky that receives so much negative reaction, literal reaction, video coverage. But again, I think it's driven by clicks and views, engagement, and other eventual monetization, which I think does a disservice, which is indeed the point of this entire audio program episode. So I watched the videos, I watched the reactions. Eric, I believe, was offering good faith assessment there in person, despite the vitriol thrown his way. I thought it was a good attempt. It was poorly executed. I'm not going to say, you got to call train wreck a train wreck again. I think if there was more structure to their discussion and there was no Joe Rogan failing to moderate, there was no real need for moderation. It would have been interesting, I think, had Eric held Terrence to a structured presentation. Like, Terrence, make up a 20 slide deck, and I'm going to spend 20 slides with you. By the way, I did find it, I think people took this as some sort of weird brag. And maybe it was. But they were talking about peer review, which is a pretty common scientific practice for quote unquote validating research and other, papers and presentations and so on. Peer review says, I looked over what they had to say and I had this feedback, but generally credible or not. So Terrence would say, peer review, peer review, peer review. And Eric would say, well, first of all, you can't go into a peer review expectation teaching. You have to go in offering your research or your opinions or your findings and see what they say. But, you're not really peers. If you're going to a Neil deGrasse Tyson PhD astrophysics, or if you're going to, he had some other people he's approached, or if you're going to, college professors or other research scientists, or, these are people that are not your peers. Your peers are actors and, people in performance, media, music. I think he plays some music as well. So your peer review would be very different. He said, you're essentially getting an elite review. And I'm sure people attack that. But what he was saying was, I'm a PhD mathematician. I do mathematical physics with some of my theories and so on. I've written papers. I've been around. He's a Harvard educated mathematician. So he's definitely not his peer. So I don't know if elite would have been maybe a better word could have been chosen. But point is, Terrence was not fully appreciating the fact that he was really getting some actual thoughtful and sincere feedback. I thought it was anyway. But I do wonder if some of the reaction streamers who completely they dominate their own channel, right? They're not, they'll block people or ban them in the chat room for some things, or they'll kind of silence them a little bit. This is my show and my opinions go. That's the way it is. So I think the take home lesson, if there is one, from the Terrence Howard Eric Weinstein interaction was that there may be more subtlety, and it was hard to find this. Their interaction, again, was not structured, and Terrence did not know how to really present his thoughts in a coherent way, and Eric, I think, was kind of trying. People accuse him of trying to, promote himself by doing this. Like, I don't know, maybe a little bit, but end of the day, though, I think more, let's say intellectual, but more discussions motivated by the discussion and not the monetization or the clout, etc., I think would be extremely valuable in the reaction space, which I don't think we're going to get. So what is this? Production by a Street. None of this is new. Only the scope and grandeur of the live streaming and amateur reporting landscape is somewhat novel. The internet is only getting bigger, and people can, you can pick up you can, if you have a cell phone, you can use your cell phone camera, but you can pick up the equipment you need to get started with a free YouTube channel. $100, $200, you can buy lighting and so on. But anybody is welcome to jump in and produce one episode or an entire series or multiple shows, etc. In the old days, we might watch Siskel and Ebert, like I referred to earlier, for their excerpted reactions, or their reactions to excerpted videos. So they're excerpted reactions to videos, but on television. So they would not watch. I think they did 3 movies in old TV. Was like 27 minutes of a 30-minute show. 27, 26. So divide that by 3, or however they broke it at 2 movies and some commentary or whatever it was. So they're going to show you Siskel's and Ebert's different clip choices and opinions, and then they're going to react to each other, and then they're going to come up with an assessment. I give this a thumbs up, thumbs down, on to the next movie. These are movies we probably did not see. They would review the movie beforehand, unless they were doing a special retrospective, best movies of whatever. Some movies they did not like that would go on to become ridiculously famous and sort of benchmarks for. I think they didn't like Alien at first, for example. Similarly, the 5 o'clock news each night 5 or 6, 5, 6, and 10. I think was the way they would present catches at 5, 6, and 10. So national news, then your local news would be, somewhere interstitial, stuck in there somewhere. Infamously credible and highly paid champions of the truth. Can you name some of the ones from this time, the 80s and so on? The Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, and Dan Rather. Do you remember those names? Instantly credible. Oh, yeah, Tom Brokaw said it the other day. Barbara Walters, another one. If they were made fun of on Saturday Night Live at the time, they probably were pretty well known. And then they would have reporters on the scene. They would have pundits on the shows. They would have, they would basically offer a less passionate reaction to the news of the day, right? So they're essentially reaction videos to excerpts to what other people are saying, but they're offered with less editorial. They were, right? So not too far off, just like Siskel and Ebert doing movie reactions. There were no useful alternate media outlets, though, in either case, right? You couldn't just go get a movie and watch it before it hit theaters, and sometimes Siskel and Ebert could do that. So same with network news. Now we call this the mainstream media. They could send people to other countries. They had reporters in the White House. They had reporters in other countries. They had reporters at locations that were inaccessible to the casual population, whether it was covering space and science or war and destruction and chaos or political, anything. They could actually be on site creating source content, primary source material. Strangely, we are assigning about as much credibility now as we did then, even with the embarrassment of riches in terms of direct access to interviews, statements, first-person video accounts of events, not to mention even more written word. So while you can often find the very same source material that's being excerpted and reacted to, you could just go watch the original, like the debate, the 90-minute debate, or like the 7 hours of Terrence Howard, and I think it's 3 and 4. I think I could be wrong. I know the second one was 4 hours. You can watch those. You can actually watch those, the source material, and come up with your own conclusions. So the embarrassment of riches we have, thanks to the internets and thanks to the willingness of people to put so much content out there, so much primary source material being made available, not to mention the words, not transcripts, but editorials, analysis, primary source material, journalism, coverage of all the nuance. All this stuff is out there. There is so much, really too much. So perhaps it is not a crime that we often go for the summary rather than the source. So, okay, maybe watching Hassan comment on something can be useful, maybe, or Vosh, or Destiny, or Ben Shapiro even, or who's the British guy? Piers Morgan, or, the list goes on. There are all manner of people who can now produce their own content. Are you a Don Lemon fan? He's got his, what is it called? The Lemon Live? Something? I don't know. There are all manner of people who are offering their own analysis. They don't have the funding or the resources in general to do their own on the ground primary source gathering, information gathering and analysis. So they're really doing meta reporting and or interviews with people who do those things. So there is some value to extract from this, but I think my conclusion will be here. We are upon the ending of this episode. Don't worry. I noticed this difference with movies. If you have not seen the movie and you watch a reaction or 3, maybe you go and hunt them down, or maybe, when you watch one, YouTube will say, oh, if you're interested in that one, here's a dozen more. They make the movie seem appealing, perhaps, and you might actually watch the movie. You may say, oh, I've never seen this. Oh, that looked kind of fun. You might even stop short so you avoid the spoilers, although you wouldn't know when the spoilers are because the person doing the reaction video doesn't know either. So you may end up kind of ruining the movie for yourself, but your mileage may vary. You might even stop short, like I said, or perhaps you might select one of your favorite movie reaction personalities, and I've mentioned a couple, and watch a movie for the first time along with them. They have their Patreon market, their their configuration that is pretty standard across the market. You get the video, you watch with them. They are not watching it with you, but you're watching it with them after the fact. And again, I don't know. I'm sure somebody does live streaming watching, and I mentioned watch parties and stuff, but you can do that with your friends. Maybe you should. You could also watch a movie with a friend, but it's not a pandemic anymore, so why would we do that? Would it be possible to consume some reaction video or similar live stream commentary with the chaos of chat prompting? That is either riling up the chat to get them to answer something or do some work or go find a clip or a reference or something, or having the chat rile up the host or other chat members. So it's generally this like chaos. And performative pontification and whatnot. Find a topic or particular incident or news item interesting. So you've taken all of this in. Maybe it's the debate. Maybe it's the Joe Rogan scenario. Maybe it's Terrence and Eric. Maybe it's any of hundreds or thousands of things happening every day. So maybe you've seen all of this. Maybe you've consumed it. Maybe you've come away thinking, and you actually seek out primary source material. Maybe you tune into subject matter experts. And maybe you consume other less editorialized assessments like analysis and informed opinion and so on of these things. Maybe that could be a potential outcome, just like the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, then the reaction video might be intriguing and lead you to want to see the movie. Similarly, a excessively entertaining or frustrating reaction video to news and geopolitics and so on may be the thing that leads you to say, I'm going to watch the whole thing for myself and see what I think. It may actually motivate the pursuit of this research, which would be seeded by intellectual curiosity and then maybe watered by goofy reaction videos. Now, I will say also the flip side of this is if you watch a reaction video for a movie you have already seen, you can start to see that, I align with the way this person watches movies. I found their insights interesting so many years later. Or you may say, that person didn't get it. I found something completely different in that video or that movie. So you could, based on a similar level of familiarity after that person's watched the movie, now you've both seen the movie, this person's expressing their opinions. Similarly, if you actually proactively seek out primary source material, real-time news, actual informed topical debate or discussion, et cetera, et cetera. Then you watch reaction videos and you say, and by the way, I did this with the Terrence Howard, Eric Weinstein thing. So I watched the videos. I watched the first video and then saw some of the reactions. That took a while because it is so long. The second one, I started seeing reactions. And then I said, wait, there's a follow-up video. So I watched the follow-up video, then I watched the reactions. So here, I think you end up with a different type of information that you can glean from the reaction videos, because perhaps they're going to pick out something that you didn't notice, or they're going to emphasize something particularly entertaining, but something that might actually be noteworthy. So you could actually find value, but I think that it's a totally different picture when you compare material that you are already familiar with, actually familiar, not by watching other clip shows, right? Total difference. I already know the material. I'm familiar. I've done some reading. I've seen the movie. I've watched the debate. I read the book, whatever it is, versus I'm going to go with whatever you say, and I didn't read the book or watch the movie. Maybe I will later. So I think those are completely different outcomes for a particular consumer of these things. And I think that while this is never going to change, like I said, Siskel and Ebert, news in general is being told to you by people who have more familiarity, more resources, more access. So you kind of have to choose a line beyond which you don't believe, and maybe you believe, however you want to do these assessments. But I am truly concerned that people are treating clipped reaction videos on YouTube or TikTok or similar as equivalent to legitimate, thoughtful, sincere, credible, authentic evaluations and assessments, and maybe a conclusion, although the conclusions would be fleeting since stories are always ongoing. But if those are being made equivalent we are not moving towards a more informed population, even though we have the tools to do exactly that. So that's my thing. Would love to know your opinion. If you ever want to be a guest on this show, that's what it's really supposed to be. FFS Talk is supposed to be what works, what doesn't, and what we can do about it. Today's episode was mostly about what doesn't seem to work, in my opinion. But it'd be interesting to hear what yours is, and no better way to do that than you can react to this. That would be funny. But no better way to do that than to have conversations and discussions that are thoughtful, sincere, in good faith, and with some sort of an interesting outcome, or at least a direction towards an outcome. I did a previous episode about phone-free schools, based on the Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, so not hate, but hate. Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist, I believe it is. I read his most recent book, The Anxious Generation, and I agree with about 3/4 of it. About the research side, I think his conclusions and recommendations are troubled, flawed. So I express my views on what we could do about that. So that's another example where, what do you think? And we can do a whole episode about it. So that's where I'll leave it. Don't forget to check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to put any money in any tip jars anywhere. You can if you want, but you're under no obligation. It's links and updates about my various projects and productions. And that is where me and my silly voice and sinus allergies will leave it for today. Thank you for listening.